Okay, so I have a new article at The Nation that's been...
It's getting some buzz.
Been getting some buzz, so thanks to everybody who's already retweeted it and reposted it. It's about the largest fast food walkout that has ever occurred in the United States. It is currently, yesterday for you guys, happening in 7 cities, including New York, Chicago, Detroit, Milwaukee, St. Louis, Kansas City, and in Flint, Michigan. And it's very exciting because there's a whole host of grievances, but primarily it's about raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. There's also been concern from workers about stuff like wage theft and McDonald's releasing that really insulting, stupid budget calculator that was like, get a second job if you want to live.
Whose idea was that?
I don't know, but man, they have to be regretting it because that just looked so terrible, and really bolstered support for the workers because they have been saying we can't survive on wages, and here was McDonald's saying we agree, get a second job.
Right.
So this is really exciting because President Obama recently just made his class divide speech where he was essentially saying, it was interesting actually, he went further than I've ever heard him go before, where he said racial tensions won't get better, they may get worse because people will feel as if they've got to compete with some other group to get scraps from a shrinking pot. Right. Which is true. We've talked a lot about that on Citizen Radio, that people sort of turn against minorities instead of aiming up at the 1% when they feel like they have less and less means. But what really bothered me about his speech that he gave was that he didn't use the word poor. And that's interesting because right now poor people, and historically poor people in the United States, have always done the best organizing around labor issues. And right now that's happening with the Fight for 15, Fast Food Forward. These are poor fast food workers.
What word's he using? Like unfortunate?
Middle class. That's not the shrinking middle class. It's not true. It's inaccurate. But they don't like to say poor. When I say they, I mean politicians, not just the president. They don't like to use the word poor because they want to get away from class war. They don't want to make it seem like it's rich versus poor.
Well, because if you say poor, that implies that, like, they have dropped the ball. Like, if someone is... Like, if you meet someone and they're like, I'm in the ever-shrinking middle class, you're like, you're fine. But if someone's like, yo, I'm fucking poor, you're like, oh, I need to help this person, or something has gone wrong.
Yeah,
right?
That's a really good point. It switches the blame from the institutions of government to the individual.
Right. And not only that, but I feel like when you're middle class, or in the ever-shrinking middle class, you can trick yourself into thinking you're doing okay. Where, I mean, we've talked about this on the show before, and this was largely by Allison and I's choosing, although we were working at a bookstore where we would have had to have a second job. But it was because we wanted to be artists that we didn't go on food stamps or unemployment, just kind of out of a pride thing, because we felt like we didn't deserve it, because we were like, well, we're going to be artists. We're trying to be artists. So, like, give it to somebody else who deserves it, because we didn't know how it worked. And, I feel like if I thought I was middle class, I would feel really guilty and somehow like it's my fault, even though I thought I was poor. If someone's like, dude, you're not poor, you're middle class. Yeah, I don't know. You know what I mean?
That's another thing. When they say middle class, it's sort of, you made it. We're all in this together.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, I guess I'm just down on my luck.
Right.
As opposed to...
There is the rich.
And there's the poor.
There is a very small middle class, and there are a lot of poor people.
Yes, exactly.
And if you phrase it that way, it seems more desperate. It seems like a lot of the blame should be, cast upon the 1%. And it should be, because they've rigged the system and they stole from millions of Americans. So the reason I was disappointed that he didn't use the word poor was for all the reasons we just said. But at the same time, the AP just released the findings of survey data that shows 4 out of 5 U.S. adults struggle with joblessness, near poverty, or reliance on welfare for at least parts of their lives. Jeez. A sign of the deteriorating economic security and an elusive American dream. 4 out of 5.
That's crazy.
And you're not going to say poor?
I know.
So if everybody could share my article about the fast food workers walkout, share it on Facebook, share it on Twitter. it's really important because this is the only meaningful way poor people can fight back through collective actions. And we should all really admire what fast food workers are doing right now, because the reason that workers at McDonald's, KFC, Wendy's were always hesitant to organize is because they could very easily get fired and be replaced like within the hour. So for them to organize when they're not part of a union, when they don't have protections, is super brave.
Yeah, and I mean, this country kind of gets off on making these workers feel stupid and feel like shit.
Yeah, a lot of the time I hear, when I write about this, people tweet me with no compassion, and they say...
Even liberals.
Right. Those are shitty jobs, so they should make shitty wages. And that is such a classist, fucking elitist thing to say, where it's like, preparing your food is not an incidental job. That's a really important job. The only reason you think it's a shitty job is because we pay them shitty wages, or McDonald's does.
Treat them like shit. And, you know... I hate to say this. Please don't be mad at me. I'm just trying to be as honest as possible. There have been times where I've seen these workers interviewed, and my first thought is, holy shit, you are so smart. And that's a terrible thing to think. And the reason I'm thinking that is because we've been trained to think that these are just the dumb fucks of the world, and this is the only job they can get. When in reality, a lot of them are really fucking smart.
Well, not only that, here's my thing. Let's say... they're not smart. Let's just say hypothetically that there are workers who didn't go to college, who didn't do well in high school, and now they have what we call the bottom of the rung jobs. They shouldn't fucking starve. Right. They should still have living wages. They're still using their labor, and they should be compensated. This shit of, you don't have a college degree, you don't have a white-collar job, therefore you should starve, is such a fucking monstrous thing to think.
Well, and also, like, again, we live in a country where it's like you get paid the most for fucking people. Like, okay, so you make someone's food, and you get paid nothing. And you have to work 2 jobs, and you can barely afford the food that you make, which is horrible, unhealthy food. And it's like, the more you fuck people, become a cop, fuck people a little more, get paid a little more, work for the government, fuck people a little more, make a little more, become, like a CEO of a big company, become the CEO of a bank, become the president. It's like, the more you're fucking people, the more money you get paid. That's like the scale in America.
Right. So I wanted to amend something I just said, which is, obviously there's not a direct correlation between people who get college degrees and smartness, you know?
I dropped out of high school.
Yeah, like a lot of people don't go to college for any number of reasons. They don't want to go. They have a family. They can't afford to go. There's a whole lot of reasons people don't go to college. The people who work in the fast food industry, to say, generally speaking, they're not smart is such a generalization. It's so insulting. And there is a lot of racism as an undercurrent in this debate we're having right now, where a lot of fast food workers are poor people of color. Right. A lot of them are women, single moms trying to make a living, you know, trying to support their children. And the fact that they are so readily dismissed by, as you said, even a lot of liberals who say, yeah, those are shitty jobs, they shouldn't make good money, to me just reeks of not just classism, but racism and sexism as well. Yeah. We saw that in the BART strike in California. A lot of the BART workers who were going on strike were women, people of color.
I'm late to go fire people. Can these Negroes please hurry up with things?
What's the language we heard? They're greedy. They're disrupting my commute. They're mean. You know, like these really the dumbest possible way we could discuss a labor dispute. And it's happening again with fast food forward, although there's a little more sympathy this time around, I feel, because McDonald's really shot themselves in the foot with that budget calculator, where they conceded that you can't survive on our wages. Where it's like, shit, well, that's the debate. The debate's over now, right? Yeah. They can't survive. Right. You have to raise the minimum wage. But as we've seen elsewhere with like Walmart trying to come into Washington, D.C. and basically saying they're going to take their toys and go home if they raise the minimum wage, these huge companies like Walmart and McDonald's do not want to raise the minimum wage. No. So it's up to workers. It's up to direct actions to force their hand.